The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. As Jesus continued his journey to Jerusalem, he traveled through Samaria and Galilee. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance from him and raised their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When Jesus saw them, he said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." As they were going, they were cleansed. One of them, realizing he had been healed, returned, glorifying God in a loud voice. And he fell at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus said in reply, 10 were cleansed, were they not? Where are the other 9? Has none but this foreigner returned to give thanks to God? Then he said to him, "Stand up and go. Your faith has saved you." The Gospel of the Lord. We certainly have a litany of saints this week. We began with Leo on Monday, St. Martin of Tours yesterday, today St. Josaphat, and tomorrow St. Francis Cabrini. Josaphat died in the year 1623 and was not canonized for about 200 years, was canonized in 1867. He is said to have been born in Poland, and yet he was raised in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Through the course of his life, he ended up being the bishop of one of the Ukrainian cities, and he was committed to Rome, to the Pope, and he had a ardent longing for the unity of the churches. At some point along the way, he became a Basilian priest of the Ruthenian Rite. Not familiar with that, but he had a great longing that the Ukrainian church would learn to come in union with Rome. Unity is hard work. It shouldn't be, but it is. For that reason, some of his detractors murdered him because they did not believe, nor did they want to be in union with the Roman Church. It's a tragic story, really, but again, as we said of Martin yesterday, was it not God the Lord that put that passion in the heart of this young man to desire unity? What if all the Christian churches were in unity? Do you imagine the power that we would have? I became aware of a statistic recently, not that long ago, some years, let's say 5 or 7, probably 10. There was about 1.5 million Catholics in the diocese, this diocese, Detroit. But now, because of the pandemic and demographics and all of that, we're down to about 900,000. And out of those 900,000, about 150,000 people go to Mass every weekend. And think, wow, 150,000 people received Jesus and brought Jesus into the world. What if all 900,000 went? Wow, that'd make a difference, wouldn't it? Again, I don't think of it this way, but something I was reading, we say Protestants. As Catholics, we think, well, Protestants. And the Protestants go, Catholics. But you know, the word Protestant, they're all Catholic, by the way. Protestant comes from protesting. They protested various things, particularly, I think, the concept of plenary indulgences through Martin Luther. So a Protestant is a protestant, one who protested in love of God, in virtue of the church, in disagreement with a dynamic or a practice of the church, but they're all former Catholics. Unity is a great sin. How often does Jesus say so clearly, particularly later in John's Gospel, Father, I pray that they may be one. Consider the power and the possibility. If Eucharist wasn't so exclusive only for Catholics, what if all the churches, some of the Lutheran synods, believe in the real presence, very similar to ourselves, the Episcopal Church? But there isn't that distinct kind of unity that there could be and should be and really ought to be. It's a worthy thought. I wasn't really planning to say that specifically today, but again, in light of St. Josaphat, it had to be a work of God in him. Why would a young priest, so enriched by his own ministry, obviously was well and highly thought of, he was an effective priest pastor to have been made a bishop, and yet somehow the Lord put on his heart the unity of the churches. Consider that. Unity, as I'm sure we're aware, but we never think of, begins with the inner self. Are you at home in your own skin? Are you at home with yourself, mindful that your greater self, your truest self, is Christ? The Christ self, the true self, as we call it. But we ourselves can be divided, and when we are divided within ourselves, that can only lead to disunity and competition in the world, in our relationships with others. It's an interesting reading from the Book of Wisdom this morning, because it points out for us, again, things that we kind of know are there and we're not particularly conscious of. We don't normally see this in the Book of Wisdom, but it's really an exhortation. Is it an exhortation or really a conviction? And he's really addressing these words to those who have power and authority in the world. And he's pointing out the fact that because authority was given you by the Lord, the sovereignty of the Most High God, you shall probe your works and scrutinize your counsel, because you are judging not rightly. How does that phrase go? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a great scourge. And if we look back, as we have been doing this week, on various saints, but through, for instance, the Old Testament, and we know historically, and much closer to our time, Ahaz, for instance. Oh no, I'm not going to ask the Lord, because I know I'm supposed to be following him, and I know I'm not, because I think my ideas are better. Think about it. St. Paul says somewhere in his epistles that we have unity as Christians, but that we also pray for those who have authority over us. And he's referring to, politicians or those who are in authority of social government. Now, if we boil that down, again, we all know we all personally have authority. You have the authority of your person. You have the authority of your person as a person of faith. And do we use our authority, our self-knowledge, our self-awareness as people of faith to live in a righteous and just way? Again, you know, we don't think about it, well, we sure complain about it, that as a first world country, and although sadly there are so many millions in our country, within our borders, that suffer poverty and starvation. We hear that on the news all the time. 1 in 5 kids has hunger insecurity. But because we are an entitled, wealthy nation, so much of our social media and social culture really is about complaining, isn't it? All that we don't have, all that we deserve, all that we should have. I know it's not nice to say, but if you pay attention, many of the advertising, media, entertainment, news, fear-based news, we ought to do something about that. We ought to fix this. This is harming me. I should be making more money. I should be paid more, etc., etc. It's a worthy thing. Quite by accident or coincidentally, it does really point to the gospel. you know, or let me tell you, that gratitude is the root. It's the heart of Christian prayer. It is. I don't remember what saint it is, but there was a saint, was it Ignatius of Loyola, who said, the lack of gratitude is the greatest sin. What, really? Never heard that before. But look at the reading. It's a pretty common reading. It seems like we just had this about a month ago, but here it is again. Now notice, Jesus is going toward Jerusalem, which means he's going to his death. But all along the way, he has inner unity in himself. He's not divided in himself, because he's in perfect union with the Father and with the Holy Spirit, so he can bring that unity of peace to many others, even to the extent that by the power of his word, he can heal 10 at once. Now, again, we can't overly convict them. Now, one author suggested that, the 9 that went to the temple, well, they did what Jesus said. They went and they got their certificate of purification so that they could be, go to the temple and go back to their families. Well, they did what he said. But is it a case where the baby got thrown out with the bathwater? They valued more the religion and the certificate of purification than they somehow forgot the giver of the gift. I was surprised that one author suggested, well, they felt entitled. Well, yeah, we should be able to go back to church. Yeah. But notice the Samaritan didn't worry about that. They wouldn't have let him in anyway, because he was a Samaritan. He realized, have you ever had an experience of being healed, touched in any way, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, morally, spiritually? Is that healing still with you? Yeah. That's a prayer of gratitude every day. This one realized he'd been healed. And it transformed not only the affliction of his skin, but it transformed his heart. And so he came back and fell to his knees at the feet of Jesus, and he thanked him. He was grateful. And because of that, Jesus could say, your faith has saved you. Gratitude is power. And it comes out more and more if you read the right kinds of articles in the medical profession. Gratitude in itself is very healing. If you're one who's inclined to journal, or if you're not one that's inclined to journal, you might write down, just take 3, 4, 5 minutes a day, middle of the day, toward the end of the day, just write down maybe one-liners for things you're grateful for. And maybe very ordinary daily things for the stability and security of your life, if you think your life is stable and secure. For the food you eat, the bed you sleep in, for your grandkids, for the money in the bank and the gas in the car, whatever. By our being here today, we're helping God save the world. We're receiving the sacrament of the Word. We're going to receive the sacrament of the altar. We're bringing Christ in the world. How much dignity God has for us. We thank God today for St. Josaphat, and we thank God for every one of ourselves, because we're the incarnate presence of Christ in the world. May God be praised by our worship this day, and may we have the wisdom to give thanks and praise to God for every great thing God has done and every little thing that we might not even remember.